Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Amanda West, and I want to welcome you to Invisible and Ignored at Witching Hour. This is a festival presented by the Englert Theater and Little Village magazine. Witching Hour is dedicated to exploring the unknown, discussing the creative process, and presenting new work. We have a number of different organizations that help put this festival together, so I want to share those with you. We first have grant support from the Iowa City Area Convention and Visitors Bureau and the Iowa City Downtown District. We also have many great sponsors, including the University of Iowa Libraries, Digital Scholarships and Publishing Studios, the Iowa City Area Development Group and their Space Merge, the University of Iowa School of Music, Obermann Center for Advanced Studies, Midwest Ticks, Velvet Coat, Revival, Feed Me Weird Things, Adamantine Spine Moving, Reunion Brewery, Film Scene, Flow Media, Iowa Shrimp Farms, Scope, Iowa Public Radio, and the Tuesday Agency. Just by our sponsors, you can see what a diverse set of programs that this festival is. As you go through your day and evening, we hope that you have a lot of inspiration, a lot of creative sparks, and a lot of new ideas. And so we want to invite you to come to the Merge Space, which is actually adjacent to this building. You can enter over by the playground and meet up with other people who also are having similar experiences and looking to have discussion about what you're all experiencing as you go through the festival. Specifically at 4 o'clock today, Reunion Brewery will be bringing in beer, so you can have a discussion and a beer at 4 p.m. at Merge. In addition, there are so many different events going on today. Two I'd like to highlight for you. One is not even an event, it's just an experience that you can have. It's called the Creative Confessional. It is up in Black Hawk Mini Park, which is just around the corner. Take 2 rights and you're there. It's a dome, it's a garden igloo, and you can go in and talk with Jamie Milne. She's a photographer and creative soul. And what we invite you to do is to go talk with Jamie about your creative regrets or wishes, and just share those with the universe. And in the process of that discussion, she will take a beautiful portrait of you that you will then have access to after the festival. I've seen some of the portraits from yesterday. They're incredible. So invite you to do that. Also, another session that you might want to check out is at 2 p.m. at the Englert. It's called Youth Rising. There will be a number of young artists who have either designed dance or written reflection pieces about what's going on in our country today and about rising up. So they will be showing some excerpts from their show called Youth Rising, and then talking about the process of building that show. That's at 2 p.m. at the Englert. With that, I'd now like to introduce you to LaTasha DeLoach, and she will begin this session, Invisible and Ignored. LaTasha.
Oh, applause. Thank you, Amanda, so much for your energy and your talent in assisting us with getting to this day. This was our first time kind of submitting to a festival like this, so you've been great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is LaTasha DeLoach. I'll be moderating this panel and event today. I'm grateful to Witching Hour and all the wonderful work that they've brought. I'd like to also thank the Englert staff because they have been great in emailing and helping all of us. This panel was put together by Sankofa Outreach Connection. We made a submission about Invisible and Ignored coming from some of our own personal experiences and wanted to see what that looked like when we brought that into the public sphere. This panel is about the power of centering the voices and experiences of women of color through art, written expression, and leadership. Lisa Covington is an activist scholar who worked on the hashtag Justice for Tory campaign in California. Tori Robinson, an African-American special education teacher, was wrongly arrested. Lisa led the community efforts for his release. Lisa is an alumni of Clarion University of Pennsylvania, where she studied social change, communication, women's studies, and sociology. She received her MA in Women's Studies from San Diego State University, where she published research entitled All the Girls Are White, All the Blacks Are Male, Qualitative Experiences of Black Girls on the East Coast. Lisa works throughout the country with youth development programs, training teachers and staff, best practices for working with young people of color, facilitating groups for young women, and provides technical support to institutions on issues of diversity, gender equity, and cultural responsiveness. She is currently pursuing a PhD in the sociology of education at the University of Iowa. Her current research focuses on young women of color and their experiences within schools, families, and communities in the Midwestern United States. Our next panelist, Sophia Mehaffey, was born in Queens, New York, and has spent most of her life in Eastern Iowa. Sophia received her BA in Political Science from the University of Iowa in 2009, and her MBA from Mount Mercy University in 2013. Currently, she serves as Vice President of the Family Promise of Lynn County Board of Directors, Chair of the Lynn County Food Systems Council, and is a member of the Cedar Rapids Food Environment Alliance, as well as the Cedar Rapids Wellbeing Advisory Committee. Sophia works for Horizons, a family service alliance, as Director of Community Health and Nutrition, overseeing several nutrition programs, including one of the largest Meals on Wheels programs in the country. In her free time, she enjoys spending time with her husband and 3 children, portrait photography, and running a fit camp in Iowa City, Saturday mornings, 8 o'clock, right? This panel is dedicated to women of color all over the world, particularly Black women, as we have been sent these subtle and not so subtle messages that we should lessen the brilliance of our intelligence, that our sexuality is deviant, and that we do not deserve to be supported or protected, or that we should be seen and not heard. Women of color, particularly Black women, have had to overcome the disadvantage of being a member of 2 underrepresented groups. They also have to deal with another form of discrimination that is not shared by Black women, by white women or Black men, which is invisibility. This means their presence is more likely to go unnoticed and their voice more likely to go unheard. How many Black men do you know who have been murdered by police or vigilantes? Mike Brown, George Davis, Trayvon Martin, for a few. Now, how many names of Black women do you know? Make our lives and even our deaths visible. Say our names, see and hear our experiences, our leadership, feel our art and gifts. I know that many times in life I have felt ignored when I have pushed against systems. At some point in time, we all have had that moment where we felt ignored or invisible. So I know that you will be able to open your hearts to hear the challenges of being a woman of color who have been invisible and ignored. Thank you. I would like to, at this time, welcome Lisa Covington.
Hello, my name is Lisa Covington. Can you all hear me okay? No? Some in the back are saying no. So the mic, I have a lab mic too. Thank you. Because I knew I was short, so this wasn't going to be a good match. Thank you. All right, so did they fix it? I'm looking at the people in the back. Yeah? Okay. So I wanted to start with this Audre Lorde quote since I was told that I was going first. I thought it might be a good way to kind of set the tone for the conversation that we are having up here, and then also the Q&A afterwards. And so I like to call her Auntie Audre, right? Auntie Audre Lorde says, "To survive in the mouth of this dragon we call America, We have had to learn this first and most vital lesson, that we were never meant to survive. And so as we think about how being in America and how Black women specifically were never meant to survive this space, I am here despite this dragon, right? I am the great-great-granddaughter of Caldonia and William Askew. I am the great-granddaughter of Eula May Askew and William Askew. My great-grandmother, Eula May, and her siblings, 10 siblings, moved from Alabama to Crestes Terrace during the Great Migration, when many Black families were fleeing the South due to the treatment there. And my family was no different. I am the granddaughter, rather, of Betty J. White and Clarence White, who both worked as domestic workers, bricklayers, and countless other jobs because they knew that they had to be skilled because they were often the last hired and first fired. Right? And so I stand here today as my ancestors allow me to be here. And with all of the work that they have provided before I was even born is something that I wanted to share with you. So Eula May Askew moved to Crestes Terrace way before I was born, with her siblings to what you know Crestes Terrace as Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is where I was born. My brother, Anthony Lee Covington, was 10 years old when I was born, and he named me Lisa Danielle, right, after 2 girls in his class. My mom always likes to throw that part in, right? So my brother, during the time that I was born, he matriculated pretty quick. My mom taught him to read because she studied to be a teacher. And he was told multiple times, including 5th grade and younger, he was told that there's some way that he must be cheating because he shouldn't know how to read as well as he did, right? Being the only Black person in his grade for so many years. And so that continued, and that trickled down to me as well when I attended a different school and had a teacher tell me that I had behavioral issues, even though I was in the 5th grade reading at a 9th grade level, right? And so she decided to hold me back, and I was actually unaware of what was going on at the time, but when I went home, I showed my mom my reading book for class in the 5th grade, because we just started, and it was a teal book that I can still remember exactly what it looks like. And my mom asked me if I already had that book because it looked familiar to her. And I said, yes, I had it. I had it last year in 4th grade with Miss Finley. And I have all these projects done, so I don't have to do anything this year. It's going to be great, right? That's what I was thinking. And so she said, usually when you repeat something in school, that means you failed. So did you fail? And with tears in my eyes, I told her that I did not. And the next day, she called the school, and it was my last day with that teal book. But because my mother was able to recognize that I had, experienced this, she had the agency to call the school and question what was going on, right? I didn't know what was going on, and so many Black children, Black girls in particular, don't always have that luxury of being visible within classrooms, right? Within a school that is a part of this dragon. So LaTasha mentioned that a lot of my work is around Black girls in education. And I get to hang out with girls all day, pretty much, is what that means, and write down what they tell me, what they say, what they do, what they experience. And so one of the things that I've noticed here in Iowa in particular and in the Midwest in general is that Black girls continue to be silenced, how I was with Miss Finley, and continue to experience that throughout their education. And so here in Iowa City, just some statistics for you on Black students and suspensions. It's about 62% of suspensions in Iowa City School District that are Black children, right? But the population of Black children is only 17%, right? So how are children who look exactly like me getting suspended at such a high rate, right? And so we see this nationally as well, with Black girls being suspended 6 times more than their white counterparts. And oftentimes we hear this narrative of, oh, well, Black males, they are in danger and in trouble. Well, guess what? Guess who's in the same communities? Guess who's in the same homes? Guess who's in those same classrooms? Black girls. One of the things that one of the girls told me recently was, we were talking about just heroes, you know, that we have, or sheroes that we have, right? And so we kind of put them on the wall, and some of them listed like Michelle Obama and TLC, right, the hip hop group from the 90s. They put down their grandmother's names, their mother's names, right? They put down all of these really brilliant women, and they didn't recognize many of the names that I put down. I put down Ida B. Wells, right? So journalists who documented lynchings and provided a lot of the lynching reports that we have from Chicago area and Tennessee, right? They had no idea who she was. They had no idea that she, before Rosa Parks, was told that she had to move from the white part of the train because she didn't belong there, even though she paid for that first class ticket, right? So in a tussle with the person who was trying to remove her, she bit him on the hand, right? And so I, metaphorically, are encouraging girls to bite the hand of teachers who are providing them with inauthentic information and telling them that they only need to know the history of Europe, which is what's prioritized in our history classes, for example, and giving them the tools to know who Ida B. Wells is, and also know who Shirley Chisholm is, right? The first Black woman to run for president in 1972. If Shirley Chisholm did not run for president, Hillary Clinton would have not had a chance at running, and Barack Obama would have never had a chance at running either, right? So if you know those names, then I'm glad. But if you don't, you have a lot of work to do, right? You have some reading to do. Right? And so I decided, like, I've been teaching college for quite some time, and I'm always the youngest person in the room. And I'm always questioned about my methodologies and pedagogies, right? Pedagogies meaning the method of teaching and how I teach. I often, when I started teaching in San Diego, I was about 20, 21 maybe. And so and I'm still the youngest in the rooms with teaching college here at the University of Iowa. So I always find it really interesting to have conversations directly with students about what their experiences are. And so this is a picture from the Afro House when we were actually talking about, this was shortly after Mizzou. The protests in Mizzou were going on. And the students, as you can see by their faces, if you can kind of make some of them out, they were hurt, they were broken, they were uncertain, and they want community. They were trying to create community around what they see so similarly here in Iowa, right? So Mizzou is not just Mizzou, just like Ferguson is not just Ferguson. Ferguson is everywhere, Mizzou is everywhere, right? And so the students were sharing a lot of their experiences on campus, harassment that they have experienced in the dorms, having racial epithets written on their whiteboards that are on their doors in the dorm, being asked to represent all Black people who have ever existed in their classrooms daily. They talked about being hyper visible, right? So being visible in these classrooms because of what they look like, while also being invisible through the curriculum, invisible until these token times come up, right? That they need to talk about Black people and what their experiences are as a people, right? As if there is some way that they could even communicate that in a sentence or two in a class, right? And so the students were just kind of sharing what their experiences were, and I was just really just listening and trying to see how I could help them, how I could build community with them, and how I could support their efforts and what they are doing or want to do. And on this day, they just wanted to talk, so I just wanted to listen. Right? And so providing Black students specifically with a space that they are able to feel comfortable and loved and sacred is the opposite of what the Dragon of America does of being ignored and invisible. How am I doing on time? So even though my students and other undergraduate students in universities often experience invisibility, Black women and other women of color experience the same things within academic environments, right? So I'm a PhD student, and so I'm being trained to be in the academy. I am being told that I need to dress a certain way, I need to wear my hair a certain way, I need to do research that is not on Black girls, but all girls. What does that mean? And when people tell me I need to do research on all girls, I'll say, well, you know, all girls have already been written about. They're also known as white girls, and that's not my research, so I'm filling a gap, right? I'm filling the gap with studying Black girls in the Midwest because a lot of folks haven't even done that work yet. And so in the academy, we know that Black women, in particular, this book, Presumed Incompetent, provides us with a lens to understand the ways in which women of color and Black women specifically experience the academy. Being invisible until those student evaluations come around, and then all of a sudden, they're mean or explicitly called bitches in evaluations that are supposed to be a measure for how the university and how academia promotes us in these spaces. And so this book really provides a lot of narratives around how women in academia, women of color in academia specifically, are invisible and hyper-visible at the same time. Right? And so this covers a lot of, I can go into publications, I can go into how I teach 100 students every week and I don't have one Black student at all. And so there are a lot of things around how do we fix these numbers, and how do we not just provide spaces for women of color in academia and Black women specifically, but how do we allow for Black students to thrive in these spaces as well, right? And so with that, I'll also provide numbers from Sean Harper's report from the University of Pennsylvania. He looked at a lot of the Big Ten schools and found that the University of Iowa has about 2% of their undergraduate population, of their undergraduate Black male population. That was it, 2%, right? And so, however, for the football teams and the basketball teams, it's well over 50%. It's about 62, 63, right? So how are we able, to recruit folks to have a ball in their hand but not a pen or pencil, right? And so there are some ways in which that we know that those things are possible to do. Right? And so LaTasha mentioned how many black women do you know that are murdered by the police, right? Can you tell me more than one name on this list? Because I know most of you will know at least one name. What names do you know of these women? Sandra Bland. Do you know any others? Which one? Yep. Mm-hmm. Any others? Do you know anyone else? Mm-hmm. Ayanna Stanley Jones in the center. She was murdered by the police while sleeping on her couch because they raided the wrong home. And the First 48 has the footage of this, but will not release it. Right, Rakia Boyd in the top left. She was shot by an off-duty police officer who thought the group that she was standing with outside had a gun. Turned out to be a cell phone. Right. Shelley Fry, the bottom left a Walmart in 2007. Someone thought she stole, the security guard thought she stole something and shot into her car and murdered her. You all know Sandra Bland in the top right. Katherine Johnson, 92-year-old grandmother. She was, again, just like Ayanna Stanley Jones, it was the wrong home, right? And then we have Takira Wilson down here, who was 26 when she was murdered in Ohio, right? So it was not just Tamir Rice who was murdered in Ohio. We have lots of names of women and girls who were murdered in that state and in others, right? And so with that, I found that it is my duty to be the voice of Black women who have been murdered by the police, being the voice of Black students who are silenced by the curriculum, who are tokenized in spaces where they should not be, who are treated as though they are only able to be athletes and not scholars. But the challenge with this is that oftentimes, because of this dragon of America, right, that Audre Lorde tells us about, we often have confrontations with other women who look exactly like us. So it's not always the dragon of America and people who don't look like me. That's not always the challenge. The challenge, especially now, is when it is folks who look like me. And so I'll end with two poems, or one poem from Audre Lorde, rather, Between Ourselves. And she says at the beginning of the poem, once when I walked into a room, my eyes would seek out the one or two Black faces for contact or reassurance, or a sign I was not alone. Now walking into rooms full of Black faces that would destroy me for any difference, where should I look? Once it was easy to know my people, who my people were, rather. And so with this in mind, we know that as a result of being in America that has predominantly a culture that values Western values and European values, that there are people of color who have become victims of this mentality, right? And so how do we live in a space and a culture that prioritizes these things, and does it make it safe in classrooms for Black students, even if the professor looks exactly like you? Dealing with the situation like as we speak, that kind of informs why I wanted to include this, because there are a lot of challenges that students of color experience in classrooms that go unnoticed, that go undocumented, that go invisible. And this was to make it visible for all of them. And so I'll end with how I began. I am the great-great-granddaughter of Caldonia and William Askew. I am the great-granddaughter of Eula May and William Askew. I am the granddaughter of Betty J. White and Clarence White. I am the daughter of Merla White Covington and Richard Covington. I am the sister of Anthony Lee Covington. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. At this time, I'd like to welcome Sophia. Let's welcome her.
Forgive me, this has been a trying month and a trying year. How do I explain in this climate my experiences on this topic, what it is to be a woman of color in leadership in Iowa? Between explaining the Take a Knee protest time and again, searching for meaning in a Me Too social media movement that doesn't quite grasp all the elements that apply to Black women, and dealing with sexual and racial harassment less than 10 days ago, it's almost like Murphy's Law has been on overdrive from the moment I agreed to give my perspective. So I think it will be easier to understand where I'm coming from with a little background on my version of Black in Iowa. I was raised here by my Caucasian mother and her twin sister. I didn't know my biological father or any of my father's family members or almost any Black people at all until I was 10 years old. It's very easy here to become insulated within a small group of people and from those interactions form your worldview. It is very easy in a 90% homogeneous Caucasian state to become isolated. The first time I heard the word nigger, I didn't know what it meant. Some boy saw me sitting on the top of the slide in 4th grade reading and kicked me off. I had wood chips in my teeth when I got up, and he said, "Shoulda moved, you dumb nigger." We'd moved to Dubuque in the early 90s, and the city was reeling from a 1990 campaign led by the mayor to diversify what 2020 called the whitest town in America. This effort to recruit Black professionals and their families was met with incredible hostility and a resurgence of Klan activity. 12 crosses were burned the summer that boy kicked me off the slide. Buildings around the city were vandalized and KKK was scrawled in giant, uneven spray paint lines. JFK Elementary was vandalized by the Klan as well, so my mother decided it was time for me to go to St. Mary's instead. The situation was so volatile that, like I said, 2020 came to town with Barbara Walters and did a segment on the racial tension caused by recruiting just 10 Black families to Dubuque. I don't remember who it was that gave me a copy of this book, but I do know that as a 9-year-old child in a very white town with crosses burning all around me, I found solace in that children's chapter book. I wasn't alone, even if the only ones who understood were fictional characters set in the 20s. Black in Iowa. I was tested in elementary school to determine whether I should skip a grade. It was determined that although I met all of the intellectual criteria, I wouldn't handle it well emotionally, so they didn't go forward with that. And I found that so funny when they kicked me out of high school after my oldest son was born. The day that I went into labor, in the approximately 20 minutes or so between the time I arrived at school and my first class, I wrote an essay for a statewide essay contest. My civics teacher, Mr. Nugel, came to the hospital to let me know that I'd won the essay contest and a $500 savings bond. I was then informed somewhere near the end of my maternity leave that the school administrators didn't believe I'd be successful at West High School anymore. No one was particularly concerned with how I would handle that news emotionally. I lived here in this city what feels like a lifetime ago. I didn't have any titles then. I was identified at that point by my position on the wrong side of the statistics. Teen mother, dependent on government assistance, Black, female. There were very few places at the time that would accept my Section 8 housing voucher, so I lived very near Pheasant Ridge, a stone's throw from the high school that had unceremoniously ejected me from the graduating class of 2002. If I could sit with my former self, what would I say? What would I say to her desperation? To her anger and her shame and her loneliness? How would I inspire her to keep trudging through the long, hard, exhausting path out of poverty and insecurity and bull? You will get out of this place. You'll get out of poverty. You'll get a house and a husband and a job with a title. You'll have business cards and an office with windows, and your grandma's going to see you on TV. You will be extended credit from a lending institution. But baby, they're still going to follow you around the store. Black in Iowa. When I was president of the Kirkwood Democrats, my boyfriend was a volunteer for the Obama campaign. He called people from western Iowa all one day out in Steve King country. One of the people that he contacted informed him not so politely that he had volunteered for a monkey. My boyfriend took this picture. I love this man. I love his clean house and his hair and the way he mows his mama's lawn. This man took me on the first date I ever had. My girlfriend babysat and we went to see a movie. And then he took me back to my Section 8 apartment next to Pheasant Ridge, and all the neighborhood boys said I just liked his big, shiny Cadillac. Like in their eyes, I looked at this man and saw an escape from the hood. I didn't have a car or a washer and dryer, and I used to walk from the apartment to the laundromat with a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old and a week's worth of clothes in the wintertime. I used to take 8 buses a day to get the kids to daycare and me to work and back home again. I used to make bread with flour and yeast at the end of the month when the food stamps ran out, so I guess I can see why they didn't see much potential for me. Most of the black female teen high school dropout mothers working low-wage jobs weren't expected to accomplish much, and I was no exception. Latch on to a nice man with a nice car and escape the struggle. But they were wrong. I love this man, and as soon as I know it, I'm terrified, and I ask him if this is something real for him or being with a black girl, is that like a novelty or something? And he's taken aback, but I'm so serious because I'm black in Iowa. It's so easy to be insulated here, and I think that's part of the reason that the woman at the park doesn't think twice when she says to me, "Are those both your children? Do they have the same father? They speak so well." How could she know how bizarre those sentences sound to a complete stranger? Why wouldn't I be flattered? When relating this story to a Caucasian acquaintance, I'm told that I'm overanalyzing. I'm a hammer and all I see is nails, and our president is black, for God's sake. When am I going to let go of this whole race thing? Somehow, right now, I know. They fell. Somehow, right now, between wrapping up my undergrad at the U and raising these kids and Beyonce singing At Last at the inaugural ball, I find my father's side of the family on social media. When I go to Birmingham to meet them, my cousin asks me the question that everybody asks about Iowa. Are there black people there? The same cousin later asked me if I feel guilty for living in a state with such a low population of minorities and such a high rate of disproportionate imprisonment that my children are essentially sitting ducks. I think about her question later the same year when I watch video of a Cedar Rapids police officer shooting unarmed Jeremy Mitchell in the neck, paralyzing him at 27 years old. Sitting ducks, black in Iowa. My daughter asked me why I didn't make her brown like myself and her brother. The other students don't believe she's black. They tell her she can't be offended when somebody says the N-word. The other parents are surprised when they drop off their girls at my door. They look around me for the actual parent. I must be the nanny or something. I wonder if mine is the first Black home they've been in. They shift from foot to foot in my foyer when their eyes finally land on the family photo: white husband, black wife, black son, wife, white daughter. And what do you do? They ask. Director of Community Health and Nutrition, I say. I oversee Meals on Wheels for the county. It's actually one of the largest providers in the country. Their eyes grow wide. Wow. Their eyes say, that's quite the accomplishment for little old you. It didn't come easy. I have friends and acquaintances who have accomplished executive director and CEO and other such lofty titles and cushy salaries with less education than I. A 4-year degree got me a part-time job working the mom shift, as was explained to me by the hiring manager. Despite several years spent showing up on time, taking the night shift so I could learn how to train employees, and attending graduate school for my MBA, I was turned down for every single internal position I applied for. Nearly all of my counterparts in this position had only a high school diploma, and they complained loudly about welfare leeches in the break room. 2 years after my undergrad graduation, I still paid for our groceries with food stamps. Eventually, discouraged and frustrated, I looked externally for something more challenging. And I took a pay cut in a contract position with another firm in order to add something with more substance to my resume. With the MBA complete, the boyfriend and I got married. We bought a beautiful home across the street from the apartment complex where I lived for over 5 years in Section 8 housing, because in Cedar Rapids, they take Section 8 in the nice neighborhoods too. I chose this neighborhood because my children could go to one of the best funded school districts in the state, even though we live below the poverty line. When we moved in, my husband and I hid and watched my son's reaction to the first room he could truly call his own. I have never had a more rewarding experience in my entire life, never, than I did watching my 13-year-old boy so overcome with joy to have his own home that he danced in circles in his room. When I got pregnant with my youngest, I was still a contract employee. There was no maternity leave, no health insurance, no guarantee of permanent employment. I've been working as a temp for over a year. I made $13 an hour. When I was officially hired on as a permanent employee at 5 months pregnant, I could only breathe a partial sigh of relief. I didn't qualify for paid maternity leave. So I worked 50 hours a week or more until the day before she was born. I went into the office every Saturday morning at 5 a.m. because it was the earliest they would let me in the building. And I would leave at the end of the day and cross the football field-sized parking lot barefoot because my feet were so swollen they no longer fit in my shoes. With all of my overtime pay saved, we were able to just squeak by with me taking 4 weeks off of work after she was born. The baby got sick at 8 weeks old and spent several days in the hospital, and we waited hours for a doctor to arrive in the ER. By the time she did, my husband had gone home to feed the older children dinner. The doctor scanned the chart and asked me if I had other children. Yes, I told her. Well, you'll need to find someone to watch them while you're here. Like my husband? Oh, you're married? Why wouldn't I be? The baby was admitted on December 19th and released December 23rd. We didn't know if she would be home for the holidays, so when she was able to spend her first Christmas at home, it was the most beautiful kind of miracle. I kept plugging away at work, trying to find an opportunity to rise in the ranks. I attended a women's leadership conference as part of a volunteer opportunity available to me through work. The first lesson from the first speaker was this: women will wait until they have 85 to 90% of the required qualifications, requested qualifications before they will apply for that job, and men will apply with 50%. I took this message to heart. Don't underestimate your own capabilities. There will be plenty of people to do that for you. Be your own biggest cheerleader. Don't downplay your accomplishments or your efforts. You will never hit a target you don't aim for. When I saw my job listed online, I allowed zero time for self-doubt or second thoughts. It was everything that was most important to me. Community activism, health promotion, innovation, political engagement. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. I might have written the job description myself. So when I got a call back, I was thrilled, but the moment I hung up the phone, it hit me. My hair. My long, blonde, curly, wild, fun hair. None of those words are synonymous with leader. I'm interviewing with the CEO, and my hair is fun. I consult Google, HR professionals, and friends on the matter. I read articles about authenticity and the natural hair movement. And in the end, I dye my hair dark and I flat iron it with no mercy. If my natural hair excludes me from leadership, my ability to be a change agent is diminished. After 5 interviews, I get the job. And statistically, in that moment, I had made it. My American dream has come all the way true. Black in Iowa. So what is it, the experience of being a Black woman in leadership? What's it like now that I've made it? On my nerdy, joyful, history buff son's 16th birthday, we threw him a surprise birthday party. To get him out of the house while everyone arrived, we had him practice driving to the mall with my husband to buy a video game as a gift. Less than 60 seconds after they roll out of the driveway, I hear a siren, and my breath catches in my throat. An article I read containing graphic depictions of the last words of unarmed victims of law enforcement comes to mind. Unlike Amadou Diallo, my baby comes home for his sweet 16 party, and I can breathe again. And I get up at 5 a.m. the next day, like I do every day, and plan for a grant to help provide meals for the food insecure. Because being a Black woman in leadership is finding the ability to block out the agony of a wound that may never heal, and doing your best to inspire innovation and progress anyway. It is hearing your ideas regurgitated and repackaged and resold for a higher price by someone with less education and less experience. It is a dream deferred and deferred and deferred until someone finally gives you a chance to prove your worth. And it is drowning yourself in your work to show that you deserved that opportunity. It is leaving a summer meal site in a mobile home park full of barefoot, impoverished children with tiny, outstretched hands and big doe eyes, and driving past a Confederate flag waving from one of their homes on the way back to the office. It is having an 11-year-old beautiful brown girl visit your home for a week and say, "This is your car? This is your house? You're somebody's boss? And you're Black?" I sure am. But baby, they still follow me around the store. Lately, I've been seeing this Me Too thing quite a bit on social media. It's been a struggle for me to accept it as inclusive because it doesn't acknowledge the battle being waged by women of color to exist at all. Am I more than an exotic fetish? Could I be a wife? Will this one more degree legitimize my worth? Am I here because of a diversity quota? Did I enunciate all of my words? What would they think of me if they found out that I listened to that kind of music? Is my son going to make it through his entire life without going to prison? Will my daughter's friends be allowed to come over again? Will she resent me if they can't? Do I feel guilty for living in a state where my children are sitting ducks? For the women, excuse me, I had one more question. Did he just call me a hooker at work in front of my colleagues and my direct reports? Isn't anybody going to say anything? For the women striving for personal and professional success, for those seeking free expression and a meaningful existence of their own choosing, for the girls dreaming of an unmolested and safe walk down the street wearing whatever the hell they want, for the ones promoting self-empowerment, self-care, and strength in other women, for those who want the agency to choose when and where and with whom to have a romantic relationship or not, and particularly for the women of color facing nearly insurmountable obstacles to life, liberty, and the pursuit, only to be degraded, questioned, shamed, embarrassed, underestimated, interrupted, patronized, sexualized, silenced, isolated, physically assaulted, intimidated, made to feel mentally inferior or crazy, excluded, invisible, and ignored. Me too. But somewhere out there is a little brown girl who didn't know she could change her circumstances. And for those girls, for our future, we must insist on being heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia.